We live in a time where culture and technology can shift drastically in a matter of years. Even though the universe in which humans have found themselves is very different from our reality, throughout most of human history, technological advancement has been extremely slow or non-existent. One would hardly notice the numerous developments that were taking place, especially in rural areas, even in the 18th and 19th centuries. For the typical person, the idea of a new product that came out every few years and fundamentally altered the world just did not exist. Deeper into history, we uncover societies that were essentially similar to one another. The same technology used by their ancestors allowed people to live and die for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Even if innovation moved more slowly than a snail's speed, these people are believed to have had cognitive capacities comparable to those of current humans in the absence of any advances. We must never lose sight of the fact that our genus and species emerged from a toothy black hole, and the human mind, is a tamed, cultured result of thousands of years of amazing thoughts. The Einsteins of the day had to come up with concepts like fishing hooks and sewing needles, which seem so simple to us now. Additionally, symbolic creations like drawings or sculptures represent a completely other degree of cognitive invention. Even if we think of ourselves as very bright, the sophisticated global culture in which we live is the main reason for this. If current humans' progeny were abandoned in a world of stone and they survived, it might take thousands of years for many basic concepts to become apparent. Keeping this in mind, you have to deny that all cultures on Earth are equally the result of millions of years of evolution as our physical forms are. When compared to our species, the societies and people of 100,000 years ago were unquestionably more advanced. In terms of anatomy, our species had been around for about 200,000 years at the time of 100,000 years ago. Despite being regarded as physically modern, they should not be mistaken for behaviorally modern. While the appearance of 300,000 years ago's Homo sapiens was nearly comparable to that of current humans, their behavior differed since they did not exhibit elaborate material culture with symbols or particularly distinctive social ties. More contemporary behavior started to emerge throughout the Middle Paleolithic, especially about 100,000 years ago. Nonetheless, it should be mentioned that a lot of paleoanthropologists think that humans did not evolve into fully modern behavior until about 50,000 years ago. Of course, there are physical remnants to support this data, but maybe more significant are a few genetic alterations that dispersed throughout populations at the time. The first signs of behaviorally modern humans date back about 100,000 years, and they come from the Lombos Cave in South Africa here. Sophisticated technology and a variety of artistic mediums are present. Above all, these individuals were presenting excellent stone points. These blades or spearheads were created in 3 intricate steps and were bifurcately flaked. First, a powerful hammer. The stone core was probably reduced to a large extent using a stone. Next, thin flakes were added to a softer hammer that was possibly made of bone or antler for more shaping. In the end, a tool like a horn tip or antler tine was used to push off tiny flakes. The points in Bombo's cave are the oldest known instances of this process, which is known as pressure flaking. This is significant since one of the key methods used to create stone tools is pressure flaking. The fact that some of these points were heat-treated before they were knapped is even more remarkable. Some types of stone are fairly rough and do not produce clean flakes when heated in the middle of a fire. This technique would only become common throughout the world after 50,000 years. These people were ahead of their time. The last point to make about these points is that they may have had an artistic or symbolic value beyond their utilitarian function. The points appear to have been made much finer than they practically need to be aspects of their production, including the projection of certain blanks, which has suggested to some researchers that they had a deeper aesthetic value. Some even appear to have been left behind in rock shelters for some reason. Stone can become much more brittle, which in turn makes it much easier to flint knap. This is also some of the earliest evidence of stone being heat-treated before being knapped. Beyond practicality, these kinds of points would not truly be found anywhere in the globe until the European Salutatorian era, a civilization that most likely produced practically slender and honed points to demonstrate their capacity to sharpen flint beyond the use of stone tools. Complex bone tools have also been discovered at the location, along with bone all points and even an engraved point. This type of technology would not be common in the world for another 50,000 years or so, but there is still much more to be discovered in this cave. Several types of art have been discovered. Since it is the oldest drawing ever discovered, a rock fragment with 9 red lines drawn on it dates to 73,000 years ago, which is not quite 100,000 years, but it is still relevant in my opinion. More than 8,000 pieces of art have been discovered in the cave. Many of them were engraved or shaved to produce a powder. Some of the pieces were engraved with intricate geometric patterns. These are thought to be some of the oldest rock art pieces ever discovered next to them. The red lines were created with red ochre, an iron-rich material that is commonly used in art across the world. 2 portable kits of ochre pigment were discovered. They included a large abalone shell that was filled with crushed ochre charcoal and mammal bone. The mixture was ground and pounded using a rock on top of the shell. The fatty mammal bone and the other ingredients would have created a thick, sticky paste that might have been used to paint tribal members' bodies for symbolic rituals, though this notion may be a little absurd. This object was likely utilized for a purpose more profound than just subsistence. Although red ochre has been used for hundreds of thousands of years and is still used today, this sample is significant because it provides such a clear illustration of its use. Shell beads are among the other relics from the cave. Numerous prehistoric human societies used beads, which are a crucial indicator of intricate social stratification. The final point to make about this incredible cave is the diversity of animal bones that have been discovered within. Large species like eland, smaller mammals and tortoises, as well as aquatic creatures like fish, crabs, seals, and even dolphins have all been discovered at the site. The variety of their food implies that a wide range of specialist methods had to have been used to obtain the results at Bombo's cave. They have been crucial to our understanding of this early stage of human evolution, but they are by no means the only advanced remains discovered in Africa during this time. Several complex harpoons dating to approximately 90,000 years ago have been found on the Simliki River in what is now the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The points of the harpoons were large and robust, with multiple barbs and crews for hafting. It is believed that they were harpoons which were used to shoot enormous fish like gigantic catfish, were discovered with the remnants of hundreds of catfish bones, indicating that this culture may have been significantly dependent on aquatic resources. Because of the extreme moisture in eastern and northern Africa during the period, there may have been a widespread culture of fishermen migrating about. It is not the earliest evidence of burial in any human species. The Neanderthals may have done it first, but it is the earliest evidence of our ancestors engaging in this behavior. Moving to North Africa, we find the Arterian culture. The East, except for Kenya, displays some of the oldest evidence of burial in our species. A 3-year-old child appears to have been buried in a small pit. Chemical analysis, along with how the remains were deposited strongly, suggests that they were intentionally buried in crushed snow shells beneath the remains. This culture, which first emerged around 150,000 years ago and continued to flourish until about 20,000 years ago, is well recognized for producing tanked points. These points are very distinct from any other points being created right now because of their slim design, which would have made them much easier to hate than the popular Laval well points of the day. This would have resulted in a projectile that was both more robust and possibly more penetrated. Their diminutive size further implies that they might have served as relatable dart points or possibly as the tips of spears. Spear throwers, also known as athletes, are a technology that makes it possible to throw lighter darts farther and faster than just plain old spears. The earliest direct evidence of this technology dates back to approximately 20,000 years ago in Western Europe, but athletes don't leave much of an archaeological trace if they are made entirely of wood, as they often are. It's possible that at some point the athletes were attached to light at lateral darts, though they could have also just been used for traditional spears. The culture was further complicated by facial points, vowel points, and even specialized bone knives in addition to their wide range of hunting implements. Some of these shells come from this east shore and are found very far inland, suggesting long-distance trade networks. Other sites in Africa from this period display that materials were occasionally transported up to 300 kilometers or 185 miles. It is clear that 100,000 years ago, our species was up to important stuff in our homeland of Africa, though even at this time our species expanded elsewhere. Even very early in our species evolution, our species was living in the Middle East. Artistic artifacts like shell beads and ochre are found at some of their sites. It has long been known that Neanderthal populations range throughout the Middle East. However, a recent discovery found another distinct population that once lived in the area, a skull and jawbone from a site in Israel dubbed the National Ramla. This is the oldest unquestionably sapient fossil found outside of Africa. In the tens of thousands of years that followed, our species appear to have radiated in parts of the Middle East. This may be the first region where our ancestors encountered other distinct human species. Researchers believe that these remains may represent a middle ground between Neanderthal and Homo sapiens, which would make sense given that both species lived in the area as far back as 200,000 years ago. It is unknown how long populations similar to these remains existed, but we can imagine that the Middle East would have been a crossroads of human diversity. Hominins are fairly distinct from Neanderthals or Homo sapiens. The remains stayed between 140 and 120,000 years ago. Examinations of the skull characteristics suggest that this group was quite archaic. Neanderthals are thought to have been the most prevalent species in the Middle East 100,000 years ago. Remains from several caves in the area show that these Neanderthals were involved in sophisticated activities, including red ochre use and burial of the dead. I will attempt to keep this portion brief as I recently completed a 3-hour research on the Neanderthals. Neanderthals from all around Eurasia are frequently solely portrayed as large game hunters, but in actuality, they hunted and crafted for a variety of food sources. There is evidence of mammoth hunting, but there is also evidence of clam exploitation and mushroom intake. Neanderthals appear to have been able to think abstractly and symbolically even more than 100,000 years ago, as evidenced by the strange construction made in the Brunu Quilt Cave, which features hundreds of stalagmites and artistic elements that are well known throughout their other sites. Neanderthals appear to have been on par with the complexity of our species during this time, when our species was still primarily restricted to Africa and parts of the Middle East. Some migrations appear to have made it perhaps as far as the Indian subcontinent, though this is unknown. At the site of Krapina in Croatia, eagle towns appear to have been strung together to form a necklace. The remains of a fellow Neanderthal show strange cut marks visually, suggesting that they may have been defleshed in a strange mortuary ritual. Approximately 100,000 years ago, Neanderthals were on par with our own species' complexity. East Asia is a very diverse region with high mountain ranges, tropical forests, and islands. These factors led to a very diverse array of hominins. Older remains are typically classified as erectus, though Middle Paleolithic finds are difficult to classify. First, let's look to the northeast, where we know Anissa Vince roamed. Denisova Cave has gained a lot of attention recently, in part because of the stunning remains found there. However, given that the site is only about 50,000 years old, much of the material found there may have been made by Homo sapiens. Regardless, Denise Evans was still living there. Two specimens dating back to approximately 100,000 years ago were discovered to be hybrid offspring of a Denise father and a Neanderthal mother. This is the furthest east that Neanderthals have been found, and I suppose the furthest west that Denise events have been found. Unfortunately, we only have two different sites with undeniable Denise event remains, one from Denisova Cave in Siberia and the other from northwest China. These are the only two places where Denise who is in DNA has been found thus far. As for Denise Vinsko's material remains, they appear quite typical of the Middle Pleistocene large chopping hand axes and the use of mostly wooden spears, though covered in a reddish ochre pigment. While it may not seem impressive, keep in mind that this object is over 100,000 years old and likely represents a small portion of the sophisticated material culture these people used. It's also possible that a different local hominin made this object. The nearly complete skull from the northeast China plain is known as homology. It resembles the jaw of a Denisovan, although its original describers thought otherwise. Until genetic testing is possible, we will never know. A similar situation can be found in Southeast Asia. The skull is similar to some other Middle Pisces seen in Chinese specimens and has similarities to the Jahi mandible. Given that contemporary human groups south of Malaysia had substantially higher Denisovan DNA than populations elsewhere in Asia, it is possible that Denise events occurred in Southeast Asia before the advent of modern humans. While most ancient human remains are classified as Homo erectus, some researchers think that some of the remains, like those of Java man or Solo man, may be those of Denisovans. DNA evidence would need to definitively prove this, but as of right now, researchers identify many Southeast Asian remains as the last surviving populations of erectus, regardless of how we would classify them. At the Solomon site, there is evidence of sophisticated bone and stone technologies, and their material remains to tell their own story. The location may have had stingray points that were used as knives or points. As a harpoon round, a long chunk of bone with barbs running down its sides may have also been employed. The smallest member of our genus, Homo floresiensis, lived on the small Indonesian island of Flores. Full-grown adults there measured about 1.06 meters, or 3 feet and 6 inches tall, and only weighed about 35 kilograms, or 55 pounds. These hominins are thought to have evolved to be so small due to eyeless dwarfism, an evolutionary process that selects small individuals due to limited resources. Some even suggest that they may have also been used as a bolus for tripping animals. Their actual stone technology seems to be relatively simple. The true range of this population of hominins is unknown. Despite having no link to Floresiensis, the present residents of the same island seem to have been affected by the same process. Despite this species' diminutive stature, they seem to have lived similarly to other hominins on the mainland. It's hard to comprehend that this place existed for hundreds of thousands of years before our species showed up and presumably ruined it. Other animals on the island included giant storks, dwarf elephants, and large monitor lizards. The reality that these people lived in seems almost like science fiction to us. One can only imagine how strange it would be to see these people go about their daily lives, feasting on dwarf stegodons one day, and then having a giant dragon come and eat one of their own. The last species that we know was walking the earth 100,000 years ago was Homolus onensis remains from a cave on the island of Luzon from around 70,000 years ago proved to be a unique population from the others in island. Southeast Asia remains consisting of teeth, finger, and toe bones. An ephemeral shaft DNA extraction failed, though the remains appear to be more similar to Australopithecines than they do to recent members of our genus. This suggests that they may be the descendants of a very early wave of hominins, or perhaps just the derived descendants of Erectus in the area. Human presence on Luzon dates at the latest to 771,000 to 631,000 years ago. Though it is unknown how old this species is regardless, we know that they would have been present around 100,000 years ago. They appear to have been quite small like Floresiensis, but we don't have good enough evidence to make a good estimation. Another interesting thing about these people is that they had to cross the Huxley line to get to the island of Luzon. This would have required a substantial sea. Although their stone technology seems to have been rather basic, crossing may be implying that they had simple maritime technology. However, they also appear to have participated in local deer, turtle, and lizard hunts. 100,000 years ago, there were many different kinds of a place full of Long Island inhabitants, but even those years ago, it was evident that our species was making significant advancements in several areas, including the creation of sophisticated technology, and more significantly, symbolic art pieces, even though we weren't the only ones. In comparison to the caves of Europe or the tripods of Africa, this region has received less research attention. However, over the next 10 years, a great deal more information will likely be discovered here, providing insight into the mysterious Denisovans and small island men. Neanderthals in the heart of Europe were in many ways on par with our development. They were producing sophisticated tools and other peculiar remains that cannot be simply explained as survivalists. Other species in Asia were undoubtedly up to important things as well. Thank you for watching. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and comment to let us know what you think. We will meet again.